Today we're continuing on from our NHL Offseason Plan series. Today we're looking at the 23rd ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Anaheim Ducks. What moves will they be making this offseason? We'll discuss the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're continuing on with our NHL Offseason Plan series today. If you're new to this series, essentially we break it into 4 segments. We look at the past season and do a recap of the 21-22 season. We're also going to take a look at the cap space situation. What do they have on the books for next year and beyond? Then we're going to look at the expiring contracts, who are the RFAs and UFAs going into the offseason, and what are the top burning questions facing the franchise that they need to address and to find the answers to before next season. So let's dive in and get started with last season's review. The Anaheim Ducks, we know, did not have a great season. Early on, though, they did show a lot of promise, a lot of potential. The young players were playing exceptionally well. And really, there were times early on when people were questioning whether or not the Ducks could be a playoff team. Now, obviously, they proved down the stretch that they were not. They had a lot less success in the second half of the season, fell down in the standings, and of course, here we are now. They finished with a record of 31, 37, and 14 for 76 points, 14 overtime losses. That really adds up. If you take most of those and put them into overtime wins instead, they're right in the mix there for a playoff spot. So there's really not that far away, but we saw the direction of the team kind of change near the end of the year at the deadline as well, which we'll get into. The Anaheim Ducks ended up scoring 228 goals for 24th best in the NHL, while allowing 266 for 23rd best. On the special team side of things, they actually had some good success. Power play was 21.9% success rate for 14th best in the NHL, while having a PK of 80.8% for 10th best. So certainly that's some good results for a team that didn't overall have a great season, but to show that their special teams are in the upper half of the league is certainly something that they can build upon. Now, of course, they saw some changes this year. We saw GM Bob Murray have to step down under some different set of circumstances. We now have a new GM for the Ducks, which is Pat Verbeek. Obviously, Bob Murray was under investigation for I'm not sure how to word it, but his conduct, I guess, was not professional in a lot of ways. Murray ended up leaving the Ducks before that investigation could be complete, and Pat Verbeek was the successful candidate to take over. Of course, Verbeek was a longtime member of the staff with Steve Yzerman, worked with him through Detroit and Tampa, so certainly a lot of experience there and had a great mentor to learn from. Of course, we saw a lot of veteran players leave town this year. We saw Ryan Getzlaf announce he was going to be retiring, so the longtime captain will no longer be a part of the franchise. We saw them trade off Josh Manson, Ricard Brickell, Hampus Lindholm, and Nick Delorier. So they kind of signaled a new beginning, a new era here in Anaheim Duck hockey. Pat Verbeek made it well known going to the deadline that there was no way that if these players were not signed, he was not going to not move them, because he needed to get assets in return to help this team for the future. It was just way too risky. After trying to negotiate some contracts to see if it was worth keeping them around, those were the conclusions that he came to. So as much as they had a good success early on, you do wonder, can they sustain that and go again next year and make progress with all the subtractions they made throughout the year? I guess time will tell, and we'll have to see where things go from here. Now, analyzing their cap space, they finished the 21-22 season in pretty good shape with just shy of $11.5 million available. Going into next year, they only have 13 contracts on the books, so there's tons of flexibility. They only have $42.1 million committed, which gives them $40.3 million available. So that's a ton of money, but they do have a lot of contracts they need to take care of within that range of dollars. So we'll have to see how they handle things here. Now, moving on to take a look at their expiring contracts. Who are the RFAs and UFAs for this team? The RFAs include Sonny Milano, Sam Steele, Isaac Lundestrom, and Urho Vakanainen. I have every reason to believe that all 4 of those players would likely be qualified and brought back in some capacity. Hard to say what those contracts look like. On the UFA side of things, they do have the Ryan Kessler contract expiring, so they'll no longer have that LTIR contract on the books. We have Andre Schuster, Dominique Simon, Vinny Lettieri, Gerald Mayhew, Zach Astorius, who was acquired this year, and of course Captain Ryan Getzlaf, who we know is retiring, so is no longer going to be an option. On those UFAs, it's hard to say who comes back. I would think Aston Reese would stand a good chance given they just acquired him via trade. The others, it's really kind of difficult to say. Obviously, when it comes to Getzlaf and the Kessler contract, we know that those are not going to be on the books any longer. So now let's jump into the final segment here. What are the top burning questions facing the Anaheim Ducks as they move into this offseason? Well, to me, the first big question here is we saw the signals at the deadline. Are they going to continue going into a much deeper rebuild? And how long is it going to be before they are more competitive? Are they able to kind of shift gears here in the offseason and get back to being competitive next year? Or is this going to be something that takes a little bit longer? I mean, if you take a look at all the veterans that they shipped out, they still have a few other veterans kicking around. And you kind of wonder, are they going to attempt to trade them? So you're looking at Adam Henrique. You're looking at Jacob Silverberg. Goaltender John Gibson. There's been a lot of rumblings about Gibson's future with this team. Is he going to want to be traded? Some think that John Gibson was not real pleased seeing all of his teammates leave town as pending UFAs that were traded at the deadline. And it's a signal that the rebuilding team is likely going to be a deeper rebuild than some might have thought. And he's got a point in his career he wants to win while he's still in his prime. So there are some that think that he may prefer to be dealt to another organization. Now, of course, we'll have to wait and see on that. There's no guarantee they do trade him. I guess if they feel like they can turn things around quickly and make him happy and want to stay, while at the same time, keeping a great goaltender in the organization, then that's something that they're going to look at. I mean, they do have a really good young goalie prospect named Lucas Dostal, who will at some point in the near future be ready to take over the reins from Gibson, but hard to say exactly when that is, that he'll be ready to be a full-time starter, and if he's going to turn out to be as good as Gibson or not, only time will tell as he continues developing. But that, to me, is a major question that they need to have answered, and I guess Pat Verbeek's probably the only guy that really knows the answer to that. You do need to keep some veterans around. I would think a guy like Silverberg would be probably tough to trade at this point. Henrique, maybe, but that contract's not the most favorable. Gibson is probably your main veteran that you could consider to get a good return on if you're going to go down that road. Speaking of players being traded, though, it's not just the veteran guys that appear to be on the trade deck here that could be up for a movement this offseason. That includes young player Max Comtois, who's fallen out of favor with head coach Dallas Eakins on a number of occasions, and it just seems like a fresh start might be what's best for himself as well as the organization. He did have a good start to his career there, but things have kind of stalled and derailed. And that's the general consensus out there amongst NHL insiders, is that Comtois would likely be a player to see moved this offseason. I would suspect the Ducks would probably want a return of another younger player, maybe in a similar situation that could benefit from a fresh start. Maybe somebody, in that 21, 22, 23 range. Might have played in the NHL a couple years and, it's just not working out with the existing organization. Maybe they can find a trade where it benefits both sides. Hard to say exactly who that player might be right off the top of my head here, but don't be shocked if Max Comtois does move this offseason. I guess another big question to me is, how much can you bank on more of the young players and the youth jumping in to take full-time roles next year? We saw guys like Troy Terry explode this year. Of course, Trevor Zegras had a tremendous season as well. It's in the conversation for the Calder Trophy. So those are a couple of big-time players. You get Jamie Drysdale in the back end. Had a solid year. Will Mason McTavish be a full-timer next year? I have to think that there's a real good chance to answer to that is yes. He did get a small sample size with the Ducks this year. Proved why they took him so high in the draft last year. Like, he was a real solid player who's mature enough physically and skill-wise to make that jump. So to me, he's probably a top 6 center for you next year. Maybe a guy like Hellison who came over in one of the trades. I mean, is that a guy who could jump into your lineup next year as well? I mean, he was one of the key prospect D that they kind of zoned in on here when they were looking to trade Manson. So that came into the consideration as well. Could those guys grab full-time spots? Because that'll certainly determine, if you need to go into free agency or trying to find other veteran players to kind of plug a few holes here while some of your young guys are still developing. And you're bound to get another prospect here that's going to be really good this year. At least you would think, assuming they keep the pick. But right now, the 2022 NHL Draft, a big-time question mark for the Anaheim Ducks. At the number 10 spot, do they consider trading that pick for a top young player? If there's one that's available that makes sense, would they be able to do something like that? Or do they keep the pick and make it a selection? If they do keep the pick, maybe they're looking at a defenseman like Pavel Mintyukov, really good-looking Russian defenseman playing in the OHL. You've got a guy like Cutter Gauthier from the U.S. national team. Frank Nazar plays there as well. Another interesting guy, could be available at the 10 spot. There's lots of others too, so interesting to see who they might have their eye on here. But they certainly, to me, I would think it makes sense if they can get a really good defenseman after moving Lindholm and Manson. That might make a lot of sense here. They have Drysdale. They picked up Helleson in trade. But at the same time, maybe they get a forward too. It's really at that kind of point in the draft. Sometimes you have to take the best player available. It's a smart thing to do, but it really boils down to what's available, right? So we'll see what happens from there. But to me, those are your top questions. I'm not really sure what to think of the Ducks team going forward. It really boils down to the direction of Pat Verbeek. But to me, I think he takes the team into a deeper rebuild. Maybe trades another veteran or two. Gibson could bring a good return. If they go down that road, I think we'll see Max Comtois in a new uniform and maybe get some more of these youth prospects in the Ducks lineup to see what they can do next year. I think they'll be an exciting team to watch. I'm not sure if they can get back to the playoffs next year. It really boils down if they make some more significant moves or not. But by trading Gibson, that'll really signal the team taking a step back and continuing to build more and more here too. So I think the decision between the pipes will be a big one to determine the future of this club. So let me know your thoughts on what you expect from the Anaheim Ducks this offseason down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.